Part 39. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 381. Chu Qing Huang said, "That's the adults of Qin Tianjian trying to make you happy." Why are they trying to make me happy? If I guess correctly, a lot of things should have happened in Qintian prison during this period, Chu Qing Huang said in a calm tone. Can you tell me? Hong Yu frowned. I made a few bets with you adults. What bet? Things go from small to big, from easy to difficult. Hong Yu counted on his fingers. First, bet on the first place in the spring festival. Second, bet on the fate of King Xian. Third, bet on whether His Majesty can borrow the money. Chu Qing Huang frowned. Bet with me. Your Majesty, forgive me. Hong Yu bowed with a very humble attitude. They insisted that I show my abilities. I had no choice but to think of a few to prove myself. Can I borrow money and still need to do divination? Hong Yu smiled. Isn't this an opportunity to fool those old guys who have nothing to do? They always feel that they are inscrutable. I, a young boy who is still young, is no match for them. They always rely on their old age in front of me. Task, 3 bets, I convinced them to lose. Although His Majesty has not yet announced to the courtiers whether he has borrowed the money, at least the list of spring palaces has been announced, and the outcome of King Xian was decided an hour ago, and in order to show fairness and justice, from the time the Queen returned to the capital to King Xian was beaten after entering the heavenly prison, Hong Yu did not leave the Qintian prison, and the whole process was under the watchful eyes of the adults. Therefore, the accurate fortune-telling of 2 consecutive events immediately improved the image of Hong Yu, a young fortune-teller, and the adults called him Little Fairy Man with great enthusiasm. After listening to Hong Yu's account of what happened in Qintian prison, Chu Qing Huang said, "It seems that you are getting along like a fish in water in Qintian prison." "It's just so." Hong Yu scratched his head and said humbly, "The main reason is that the adults are incompetent." And suddenly a young godman landed in the Qintian prison, making them overjoyed like a rain shower. Chu Qing Huang's expression paused, and the look in his eyes became subtle. "You are not humble at all." Kurha chuckled. But soon he frowned and said, "Your Majesty went to Dongling to bring too few people, so it would be very risky." "I know it well. Your Majesty is the emperor now and the king of a country. How many pairs of eyes in the world are watching?" Hong Yu curled his lips. "There are many people who are secretly plotting evil. No matter how good your skills are, you cannot take them lightly. After all, 2 fists are difficult to defeat with 4 palms. Your Majesty still needs to be cautious." "Why are you talking so much all of a sudden?" Chu Qing Huang put down the pen, picked up the teacup and took a sip, like a 3rd aunt or a 6th wife. Hong Yu choked. "Don't I care about His Majesty?" Chu Qing Huang hummed, "Thank you for your concern. How is your Majesty doing these days? You are so busy coming and going, you must be exhausted." He walked to Chu Qing Huang's side and asked diligently, "Do you want me to press your Majesty's buttons?" "What?" Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows. "Want to take advantage of Fukang's absence to compete for favor?" "That's not true." Hong Yu coughed lightly, as if he suddenly saw through the world of mortals. "I have already thought clearly, it does not belong to me, and there is no point in fighting. I am now dedicated to serving your Majesty, and I don't want to do what he wants. After I have made great achievements, your Majesty, can you make me a national advisor?" "National preceptor?" Chu Qing Huang was surprised when he heard this sudden title. "Why do you think it's one thing after another? What are you planning?" "I'm not talking about now," Hong Yu said quickly, "when there is a chance in the future." "When will there be a chance?" Hong Yu sighed faintly. "The secret must not be revealed." Chu Qing Huang. The atmosphere was strange for a moment, but fortunately someone came in soon and reported, "Your Majesty, the 2nd young master of Prince Rong's residence and the 2nd young master of the Wen family have arrived." "What are they doing here?" "I asked them to come," Chu Qing Huang said, and then ordered, "Let them come in." "Yes." Chu Suans and Wen Zhan are the two most impressive performers among the students in the imperial capital. One represents the royal family and the other represents the official family. Although the palace examination has not yet begun, the rankings of number 1, number 2, and number 3 have not yet been determined, but there is no doubt that among the aristocratic valves, these two are undoubtedly the best. There will also be outstanding people among students from poor families. After Chu Qinghuang read the files carefully, he already had an understanding of the students' situations. She summoned Chu Suans and Wen Zhan to pave the way for these students in the court in advance. Once the young upstarts stepped into the court, they would have to deal with officials who had been in the officialdom for many years. Chu Qinghuang wanted to cultivate a "the thigh is truly your own," a powerful humoral loyalist. I want you to make friends with students who are broad-minded and honest, with far-sighted vision and strategies. I want them to dare to speak out, dare to act, dare to be angry and dare to be unfair. Chu Qinghuang's tone was serious, and every word seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. I don't want them to. I see that any one of these students has interests involved with the officials in the government. The two of them respectfully accepted the order. A group of young, energetic, loyal, and courageous students are about to enter the court, injecting new energy into the court. $window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 382. On the 8th day of April, a letter was delivered by express horse from Mianbei. After 6 months of rectification and cleanup, using both deterrence and winning over, Qi Ling finally took control of Mianbei. With the help of Shen Zongjin, he made a brand new cotton-padded jacket for each member of the Zhenbei army in the winter before the new year. After the new year and the beginning of spring, the army replaced a batch of sophisticated weapons, which greatly boosted morale. Qi Ling also promised to ask Her Majesty the Queen to purchase a batch of war horses and armor for the Zhenbei army, and to build a batch of iron cavalry of at least 10,000 people as much as possible. The generals in the army have always convinced others with their abilities. After the confidants of the Zhenbei king and his son were eliminated, demoted, and even dealt with by military law, the rest of the soldiers had completely accepted this commander who was hundreds of times stronger than Qi Yun after Qi Ling conquered them for 6 months. With Qi Ling guarding Mianbei, Chu Qinghuang was relieved. The most important thing next was to fulfill Qi Ling's promise to the soldiers. There is no joking in the army, and a strong country must first have strong soldiers. In early May, Zhou Xiao arrived in the imperial capital. The famous Zhou Liu had a lot of followers in the business world, but he was just a businessman after all. In the imperial capital full of powerful people, his status was not worthy of being in the upper class. Moreover, King Xian had been imprisoned, and Qin Kuaju's family, who had a marriage relationship with the Zhou family, was also implicated and imprisoned. Who would dare to get involved with Zhou Xiao at this time? The situation was sensitive, and his status was also sensitive, so officials avoided him as much as possible. Zhou Xiao handed over a token and a visiting card to ask for an audience with Prince Rong. After informing him of his purpose, Prince Rong took the token and the visiting card and went to the palace to report the matter to Chu Qinghuang. Zhou Xiao, the 6th son of the Zhou family, said that he was summoned by His Majesty. I dare not make a decision on my own, so I came to ask your Majesty for instructions. Chu Qinghuang had long known about Zhou Xiao's arrival in Beijing, and also knew that he had been rejected several times outside, but she ignored it. On the one hand, she intended to let the 6th master of the Zhou family taste the warmth and coldness of human feelings, and on the other hand, let him get to know his identity well. The Xianwang mansion and Qin Kuaju mansion were imprisoned one after another, and the Zhou family's backers in the imperial city had fallen. Now the Zhou family faces only two paths, one is to offer their loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen, and the other is to be slowly eroded and replaced by other families. If you want to govern the country, whether it is military or economic, you can't be restrained by any family. If the Zhou family doesn't behave, it will only perish. Chu Qinghuang looked at the token on the table and said calmly, "Let Chu Xuanyi take him to the palace." Yes. Prince Rong took his leave. Zhou Xiao was sitting by the window on the second floor of a restaurant in the imperial city at this time, holding a teacup in his fingers, silently analyzing the current situation. The empress had just returned to the palace and dealt with King Xian, without even giving him time to prepare. It was completely caught off guard, and none of the civil and military ministers in the court stood up to oppose and plead for mercy. It can be seen that the empress was a terrible person in the hearts of the court officials. The saying of the evil spirit was not groundless. Ministers have always been best at hitting pillars, committing suicide, getting sick, retiring and returning home, and many emperors also fell for this. Unexpectedly, in front of Chu Qinghuang, it was so calm. Except for causing some uneasiness, no minister made a fuss. Zhou Xiao drank a sip of tea slowly. Thinking of the consecutive setbacks in the past 2 days, he already knew in his heart that if the Zhou family did not declare allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen and did not let Her Majesty the Queen see his sincerity, I am afraid that the end would not be too good. With a sigh of relief, Zhou Xiao turned his head and looked out the window. Chu Xuanyi led his men straight to the restaurant, walked into the lobby quickly, and went up to the second floor from the lobby stairs, which attracted the attention of the guests in the restaurant. Zhou Xiao put down his teacup, stood up, straightened his clothes, and walked towards him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 383. Chu Xuanyi looked calmly at the man in green shirt in front of him. Sir, Mr. Saturday. Zhou Xiao nodded. Xiao next week. Chu Xuanyi took out a token. Her Majesty the Queen has summoned me. Yes, Zhou Xiao nodded and said politely, please lead the way. So under the personal escort of the commander of the Royal Forest Army, Zhou Xiao was able to enter the palace smoothly and went straight to the Qinzhen Hall. This was Zhou Xiao's first time entering the palace, and it was different from any place he had been to before. The majestic palace gates, row upon row of palaces, one post every 10 steps, one sentry every 5 steps, orderly guards of the Imperial Forest Army, and even the blue bricks on the ground reveal the noble and majestic aura that has been passed down for thousands of years. Arriving at the Qinzhen Hall, Chu Xuanyi paused slightly and turned to look at him. This is the Imperial Palace. What you are going to see later is Her Majesty, the most noble Queen of Ziki. Do you know the etiquette and rules for meeting the Emperor on Saturday? Zhou Xiao was silent. His consciousness was still stuck on the scene when they last met. He deliberately ignored her identity, chatting and laughing, being gentle and elegant. Now I realize that there is a gulf-like distance between their identities that can never be bridged. Nodding slowly, he said, I know something. Chu Xuanyi said nothing more and stepped into the palace door. Your Majesty, the young master has arrived on Saturday. Zhou Xiao raised his eyes and looked at the woman sitting on the desk reviewing the memorial. It was the same person, but in a different location. Her demeanor was very different. And he also needs to treat it with a completely different attitude. Common man Zhou Xiao, please see Her Majesty the Queen. Zhou Xiao lifted up his clothes and knelt down. Zhou Xiao respectfully performed the salute and said, Long live Her Majesty the Queen, long live, long live. Long live. Chu Qinghuang raised her eyes from the memorial, glanced at him casually. Her voice was light and did not distinguish between happiness and anger. If Mr. Zhou's last plan was successful, I might not even live to be 16, so why live forever? Chu Xuanyi's face changed slightly, and he frowned and looked at Zhou Xiao. The common people deserve to die. Zhou Xiao lowered his head and said, Your Majesty, please punish me. If I want to punish you, you will only die. Chu Qinghuang closed her eyes, folded the memorial in her hand, and took another one casually. Chu Xuanyi, you go out first, I will talk to him alone. Talk. Yes. Chu Xuanyi bowed, I'm leaving. Chu Xuanyi retreated, leaving only Chu Qinghuang and Zhou Xiao in the palace. There was a moment of silence. Chu Qinghuang opened the memorial in his hand, frowned slightly, read only 2 lines, then put it together and threw it aside. For more than a month after returning from Dongling, every day ministers worked hard to write memorials, asking her to fill the harem. Today alone, 3 similar memorials have appeared. Even yesterday, there were ministers in the court who said righteously that the emperor must have no heirs, and that the issue of heirs is related to the stability of the country, as if she didn't choose the emperor's husband, Ziki would soon be destroyed. Not doing business properly. Sure enough, the decision to train young upstarts was the right one. These old ministers didn't know what they were thinking about all day long. They didn't do much of the business and just stared at her harem all day long. Chu Qinghuang looked indifferent. She was just 16 years old, and she was anxious to have a baby not long after she ascended the throne. Is she out of her mind? I wonder what Her Majesty the Queen wants to talk to the common people. Zhou Xiao didn't hear her speak for a long time, so he took the initiative to ask with a respectful attitude, the common people listen carefully to Your Majesty's instructions. Chu Qinghuang was silent for a moment, put down the pen in his hand, put the memorial aside, relaxed his body and leaned back on the chair. His eyes finally fell on Zhou Xiao. Can't you see that I want you to kneel for a while longer? Zhou Xiao remained silent for a moment, lowered his head and said, the common people know their guilt. You should already know about Prince Qian being sent to the heavenly prison. Chu Qinghuang said indifferently, what are your thoughts? Zhou Xiao thought for a while. The grassroots people had set up checkpoints on the road before. Almost all the people on the only road from Dongling to Ziki were manned by the grassroots people. The instructions given by King Xian were to silence people. After thinking about it, the grassroots people did not dare to follow his instructions. Do. So you already know my identity? Yes. Knowingly committing a crime will be punished by an additional level. Chu Qinghuang said, do you know that the crime of regicide punishes 9 tribes? Zhou Xiao said respectfully, the common people did not take action. This is not a reason. Chu Qinghuang picked up the teacup and said in a cold and ruthless voice, if you have the intention to kill the king, you are treasonous and deserve death. Zhou Xiao was shuddered and leaned over to confess, the common people deserve to die, let your majesty do whatever you want. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 384. Chu Qinghuang nodded slowly, I really want to think carefully about how to deal with you. Zhou Xiao knelt on the ground and lowered his eyebrows in silence, but he couldn't help but think in his heart that Her Majesty the Queen had returned to the imperial capital for more than a month, so it was impossible that she had not thought of how to deal with him. If she really wanted to deal with the Zhou family, she would have sent people to raid the house as early as when King Xian was imprisoned. Since he was given a month, it meant that there was still room for change. After a slight shift in his mind, Zhou Xiao spoke proactively and respectfully, Your Majesty, the common people have something to report. Explain. The common people heard about the change of generals in Mianbei a few days ago. General Qi promised to build 10,000 new iron cavalry horses. A strong country needs a strong army. This matter is an important matter for the country. His voice was gentle and humble. Your Majesty is the first to ascend the throne. There must be more. There are many things to do. When a king governs the world, he needs money everywhere. The common people dare not ask for help. They only want to show their loyalty and hope that your Majesty will understand. I don't like playing riddles with others, Chu Qinghuang said calmly. Although the national treasury is not rich, not everyone is qualified to negotiate terms with me. Zhou Xiao, if you can't make my heart move, it's better not to say anything. Zhou Xiao understood what she meant. I was mentally prepared for coming here this time. After all, when negotiating terms with the king of a country, you must show the utmost sincerity. When the emperor governs the country, each expenditure can cost tens of millions of taels, and it is not something that small businessmen and hawkers can bargain with. The 9 clan of the Zhou family cannot be bought with just a few 100,000 taels of silver. After pondering for a moment, he said, the maximum amount of money that ordinary people can make the decision is 5 million taels of silver. To express my feelings, I only ask for your Majesty's grace. Taking out 5 million taels of silver at a time is not a small sum for the Zhou family. It is difficult to collect it in a short while, but it can still be done if you think of a way. If there are any more, it will inevitably break your muscles and bones. The bigger the business, the more money needs to be turned over. Once there is a problem with the flowing money in the hand, it will affect the whole body and inevitably hurt the lifeblood. Chu Qinghuang sipped her tea silently, knowing in her heart that Zhou Xiao was indeed sincere. It seemed that his attitude of making up for the mistakes was sincere. So she nodded, I won't embarrass you. The Zhou family has given out 5 million taels. In addition, any amount of silver that King Xian and the Qin family have deposited with you must be returned in full. This money was obtained by greed, and it should belong to all owned by the imperial court. Zhou Xiao breathed a sigh of relief. Yes, the common people will definitely comply. I am not interested in the way businessmen do things. They all say that there is no business without treachery. In the shopping mall, it is inevitable to play tricks and set traps. I will not interfere with normal competition, but I will give you a warning today. Chu Qinghuang's eyes were full of meaning. Liao Weiya said, people's livelihood is the foundation of the country. The demise of every dynasty is because the people were forced into desperate situations. Therefore, my bottom line is not to bully the people and do things that harm the people's livelihood. Zhou Xiao's expression condensed slightly, the common people must obey the holy will. Whatever the Zhou family has done in the past, for the sake of 5 million taels of silver, I will expose it all today. But you'd better keep what I said today in mind. As long as I am still in power, if the Zhou family dares to do something that violates my bottom line, there will be no chance of a second pardon. Zhou Xiao responded, the people must remember this. Chu Qinghuang felt that what needed to be said had been said and there was nothing more to say, so she said calmly, step back. Your Majesty, Zhou Xiao said carefully, Your Majesty has been on the throne for half a year. Do you have any intention of drafting? Chu Qinghuang raised her eyebrows slightly, what? Do you want to enter the palace? The humble people are humble, but if they can be favored by His Majesty, they will be willing to do the work of dogs and horses wherever the money is used in the future. I'm not interested in you. Chu Qinghuang reached for a memorial and continued to deal with official duties, but if you are really serious about serving me, I will be willing to accept your money. Zhou Xiao's expression paused. If it weren't for the wrong occasion, he would probably laugh because of these words. She seems to be too frank and won't even beat around the bush. Even if kings in the past wanted to get money from businessmen, they would not be so straightforward. They would always come up with some roundabout reasons or high-sounding excuses. She was the only one who said honestly and straightforwardly that she was only interested in money. Just like the rumors in the past, she frankly admitted her ambition to compete for the throne in front of the former emperor and the princes. It is said that the whole house was shocked. This is a woman that no one can see through. She is obviously so strong and cold, and shows no mercy to those who oppose her, even her own mother, concubine, and uncle. She does not have the tolerance and mercy that an emperor should have, but she knows that people's livelihood is the foundation of the country, and the people cannot be the king. The bottom line is violated. It was clear that there were not many good things to say about her. She was violent and fond of men, and did not have the magnanimity that a king of a country should have. However, she bluntly rejected the possibility of him becoming a harem. Ming is so frank that he is not like a king whose imperial heart is unpredictable. He does things as he pleases, speaks without scruples, and is forthright and honest. However, when all these qualities are put on her, it just makes people unable to see through them. Because she is so different from the emperors of the past dynasties, there is no similarity at all, which makes people feel at a loss and don't know how to deal with it. The ministers have long been accustomed to the unpredictable nature of the king, but they did not expect that the thoughts of a queen are even more unpredictable. Even though many times, her thoughts have been clearly conveyed to everyone, but because they are so clear, it always makes people feel unbelievable and can't help but give rise to more speculations. Zhou Xiao was in a complicated mood at this time. He was glad that he had not done anything irreversible and had not brought the Zhou family into a desperate situation. But at the same time, he was somewhat uneasy and realized that some things seemed to be out of his control. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 385. Chu Qinghuang glanced at him, frowned slightly, and thought, "You can leave." Zhou Xiao came back to his senses, instantly suppressed the thoughts that shouldn't have in his heart, and bowed respectfully to leave. Chu Qinghuang silently watched his back, and in a moment, he ordered someone to call the Minister of Revenue over. The Dongling royal family borrowed 10 million taels of silver, and the Zhou family borrowed 5 million taels. These two sums of money were collected into the national treasury and recorded in the account book. Without my permission, not a penny can be moved. The 10 million taels of silver borrowed from Dongling were fully processed, and the emperors of the two countries stamped their seals and signed. The silver had been handed over to the treasury half a month ago and was also recorded in the account book of the Ministry of Revenue. I didn't expect that the Zhou family could still hand over 5 million taels. But Wen Xingyun hadn't had time to be happy that the national treasury had a large amount of money. Hearing this sentence, it was like a basin of cold water suddenly poured down. He, the Minister of Revenue, has no right to use the silver in the national treasury? I use this money to support the army. Chu Qinghuang glanced at him. If anyone dares to mess with it, I will never let them off easily. Wen Xingyun hesitated. Your Majesty, it shouldn't take so much money to support the army. The treasury is tight, and there have always been many places where money is short, and money is needed elsewhere. Let's not talk about other things. For example, the students who passed the exam nearby have lived in the imperial city for more than a month, and their food and accommodation expenses are all provided by the court. After the palace examination, Your Majesty will also hold a banquet for them, as well as the food and clothing expenses of the Empress Dowager and several concubines in the harem, as well as the salaries of officials. Stop! Chu Qinghuang interrupted him. Officials' salaries should be paid as usual, and the expenses of the harem should not be too extravagant. My father advocated frugality when he was in power, and I am the same. Yes. Spend where you should spend, and try to save where you shouldn't spend. Chu Qinghuang said calmly, this money is not easy to come by. The money from Dongling will be returned with interest in the future. Every ounce of silver must be spent on the right things. Yes. All the students' expenses should be recorded in the account book, and be detailed. After the palace examination is over, I will check the accounts. Wen Xingyun, isn't it the responsibility of the Ministry of Revenue to check the accounts? Chu Qinghuang ignored what he was thinking and said calmly, go down. Wen Xingyun was more and more dissatisfied, but he didn't dare to say anything. He responded respectfully, yes. Although he, the Minister of Revenue, cannot be said to have no real power, because the treasury can use too little silver, even if he has real power, it is equivalent to a decoration. The Ministry of Rights needs money, and he can't approve it. The Ministry of Personnel needed money, but he couldn't approve it. The Ministry of War needed money, but he still couldn't approve it. The officials of various ministries had a lot of complaints about him. But who could understand his pain? Wen Xingyun thought of the officials in the court who were full of complaints and looked at him coldly at every turn, and suddenly felt that the position of the Minister of Revenue was really difficult. Busy days passed one by one. In the palace examination in June, students took a round of written examinations and a round of oral examinations, and each showed their magical powers. Students who entered the list of the spring examination will no longer be eliminated when they enter the palace examination. The purpose of the palace examination is to determine the first, second, and third places. There are 3 first-class jinchi, the top scholar, the second-class scholar, and the third-class scholar. There are 45 second-class jinchi, 15 more than in previous years. There are 65 third-class jinchi, 15 more than in previous years. The new emperor ascended the throne and needed to select talents. The additional 30 places were a blessing and grace for the students, and a reserve of new forces for the king. Not all the students who passed the list were talents that could be reused. Only when the proportion was large could more talents that satisfied her be selected. As for the other mediocre people, they could be placed in idle positions to make up the numbers. However, there was a paper in the palace examination that caught her attention. Chu Qinghuang held the candidate's answer sheet in her hand and read it carefully from beginning to end. Rather than saying that this is an answer sheet, it is better to say that this is a petition. The only difference is that the person who wrote the petition is outstanding in talent and humble in words. He started by praising the wisdom and bravery of Her Majesty the Queen, and naturally led to the stupidity and tyranny of the local officials. All the dissatisfaction and unwillingness were expressed vividly between the lines, making people deeply feel the sadness, despair, and powerlessness of people in trouble. At the end of the article, it ends with a few words of advice to the king and strategies for governing a region. It is written very profoundly. Chu Qinghuang saw the signature on the answer sheet, Yun Heng. He calmly wrote down the name, folded the answer sheet and put it aside, and then looked at other people's test papers. He read through them one by one, and there was no special expression on his face. The palace examination was held in court, and the papers were read in court. The emperor and all the civil and military officials were watching, so there was no possibility of cheating. The articles were also improvised and written on the spot. Chu Suans wrote about the policy of governing the country, and the theme of Wen Zhan's article was the foundation of people's livelihood. In short, they were inseparable from family and national affairs. Chu Qinghuang read through them one by one, and passed the articles that he thought were outstanding to other ministers. Only Yun Heng's paper was suppressed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 386. This year is her first palace examination after ascending the throne, so she pays special attention to it. From the autumn of the previous year to the spring of the next year, the checks are very strict, especially the spring. Although she was not in the imperial capital, she and Prince Rong decided on a fair and strict examiner to ensure that all the successful candidates had real talents and had no cheating. The palace examination is an opportunity to show off your true talents and knowledge. Even if someone has cheated before, the secret will definitely be revealed in the palace examination. After the palace examination, Chu Qinghuang selected Chu Suans as the top pick, Wen Zhan as the second pick, and Yoon Hung as the top pick. This result is a bit surprising, but not too surprising. Many officials recognized the knowledge of Chu Suans and Wen Zhan, because it was these two who showed their prominence in the autumn of last year, and they still took first and second place in the spring of this year, but Yoon Hung was the only one who made the difference. People are puzzled. Moreover, no one else except Her Majesty the Queen has seen his papers. What did he write that made the Queen directly choose him to be the top pick? Doubts arose in the minds of the officials, and at the same time, they began to pay special attention to Yoon Hung. Her Majesty the Queen has a decree. The top 3 candidates, the second place candidate, and the third highest ranking scholar, will join the imperial study to participate in politics. From now on, they will enter the imperial study to listen to politics. The ministers were all surprised. The first thing he did was to participate in politics in the imperial study room. Does Her Majesty have too high expectations for these 3 people? Even the top picks are mostly sent to the Hanlin Academy to gain experience from the bottom. Who has just joined the officialdom and served as a servant to the king? Different from the speculations in the hearts of the civil and military officials, the 3 young students in the first class are probably just newborn calves who are not afraid of tigers. They have not yet realized what it means to participate in politics in the imperial study room. They only received the order respectfully, neither humble nor arrogant, with no expression on their faces. Not the slightest hint of pride or fear. The other second-class and third-class jinchi were led to various places by officials from various ministries according to the titles conferred by the Queen. After a busy day, Chu Qinghuang was finally able to leave the majestic hall and step into the imperial study. The crowd dispersed and the ears became quiet. Chu Qinghuang sat on the chair, raised his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. "Your Majesty, are you tired?" Yuan Bao took the initiative to step forward and said, "I will give your Majesty some pressure." "No need," Chu Qinghuang refused. She felt that no one in the world could press her more comfortably than Fu Kang. "Make tea." "Yes." The 3 of them quickly stepped into the royal study, lowered their eyebrows and lowered their eyes, and knelt down respectfully to salute, "Your Majesty the Queen, long live my Emperor." Ping Shen Chu Qinghuang's tone was calm, and the majesty of the king of a country was naturally revealed in his voice. "Do you know why I specially called you here?" Chu Suans respectfully replied, "I don't know." Yoon Hung. Yoon Hung, the only one among the 3 who could be considered a poor student, took a step forward, bowed his head and knelt down. "Your Majesty." "Look up." Yes, Yoon Hung raised his head slightly, but his eyebrows were lowered, and his posture was always humble. Chu Qinghuang looked at him. The man in front of her looked about 23 or 4 years old. He was dressed in plain clothes and had an indifferent and simple scholarly atmosphere. The appearance is also good, with regular facial features and clear outlines. His skin color is not as fair as the students at the foot of the imperial city, and he looks somewhat healthy. "Where is your ancestral home?" "Reporting to your Majesty, the common people are from Julian Town." "Was who?" "Is your family a tea farmer?" "Yes," Yoon Hung replied in a low voice, "more than half of the people in Julian Town are tea farmers, and they have made a living growing tea for generations." "How was the harvest this year?" "Kayaman comes to Beijing in January to take the exam, so we don't know much about the harvest situation, but in previous years, all spring tea picking will be completed before May." Yoon Hung replied, "Affected by the weather this year, the spring tea production should be reduced. Kayaman predicts, the price of the first batch of spring tea will soar in the hands of tea merchants, but this has nothing to do with tea farmers." "Why?" "Julian Mountain is the hometown of Ziki tea. Most of the world-famous tea is picked from Julian Mountain. However, tea merchants in Wuzhou already have a monopoly on the tea industry. During the harvest season, the price is lowered and purchased from tea farmers. When production is reduced, the price is not raised. Tea farmers are becoming more and more miserable every year. They own a large area of tea mountains but cannot even solve the problem of food and clothing. The local government does not act, and the common people have no choice but to write an article on this in the Imperial Examination today to complain to the Emperor Yun Hung kowtowed. The common people are guilty of overstepping their bounds and are willing to accept His Majesty's punishment. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 387. Chu Qing Huang was silent for a moment, and said coldly, "So this is an official collusion with evil forces." Yun Hung fell to the ground. "Yes. I know, you get up first." Chu Qing Huang glanced at him. "Chu Suans, how do you think such a thing should be dealt with?" "Reporting to your Majesty, I think this matter is very serious. The collusion between officials and businessmen to monopolize the tea industry has cut off the livelihood of tea farmers. The top priority is to send an imperial envoy to Wuzhou to investigate the case. If the situation is true, it will be dealt with according to the rules of the family and country. Such people cannot be tolerated." Chu Suans replied respectfully, "It's just that the selection of the imperial envoy needs to be carefully decided. In addition to courage and wisdom, he must also be cautious, have a sense of crisis and the ability to protect himself. Otherwise, it's either a tip-off or a head-on, which wastes time and easily alerts the enemy." Chu Qing Huang said, "Such a person is not easy to choose." Chu Suans frowned. It was indeed not easy to choose. Old officials with experience in handling cases in the court may not be willing to travel a long distance to Wuzhou. Even if they go, there is no guarantee that they will do their best. If Wuzhou gets the news before people arrive, how can they investigate the case if the government and the profiteers are in collusion and prepare in advance to deceive the superiors and the subordinates? And young officials do not have much experience in handling cases for the time being. Even if they have passion and courage, they will inevitably be calculated when they arrive at the territory of the local snakes. Chu Qing Huang thought of a very suitable candidate in her mind. After a moment of hesitation, she said, "Is Zhou Xiao still in the imperial city?" Chu Suans was stunned, and then guessed, he should still be. This Mr. Zhou is also very strange. He arrived in the imperial capital in May, just in time for the sensitive period after King Xian was imprisoned. The officials in the imperial capital avoided him, but he was able to enter the palace smoothly and unexpectedly escape unscathed. The Zhou family was not implicated by King Xian, which made the whole court more confused about the empress's mind. It was not until later that they heard that Zhou Xiao had contributed 5 million taels of silver that they instantly understood what was going on. It turned out that he was using money to buy his life. However, after buying his life, he stayed in the imperial capital for a long time and didn't know what he was thinking. Zhou Xiao actually had no idea. He just suddenly had a big psychological gap. He originally thought that some things could happen naturally, but when he really faced them, he found out how whimsical he was. He thought that spending 5 million taels could buy peace of mind, but after leaving the palace, he found that he couldn't feel at ease at all. Many elders of the Zhou family were still waiting for him to go back and take reassurance pills, but he stayed in the imperial city for a long time and was unwilling to leave. Every time he decided to leave, he felt like a big stone was pressing on his heart. It took him more than half a month to realize that he not only lost 5 million taels on this trip to the imperial capital, but also lost his heart. It seemed a bit absurd and ridiculous. But he really couldn't laugh. So when he heard the queen's order to summon him again, he could hardly control the sudden surprise in his heart, and was deeply looking forward to meeting her again. Sixth Master, the attendant looked worried. Will Her Majesty go back on her word after getting the money? Zhou Xiao frowned. Your Majesty is not that kind of person, don't talk nonsense. But what if? No, what if Zhou Xiao interrupted him, got up and walked out, enter the palace. In the imperial study, Chu Qinghuang's voice was steady and full of pressure. Chu Suans, I appoint you as the imperial envoy for this Wuzhu case, let Zhou Xiao assist you, and go to Wuzhu in 3 days to find out the truth. The Zhou family has a huge business power, and they should have a deep understanding of Wuzhu tea merchants. With his assistance, they can get twice the result with half the effort. Chu Suans was surprised, but he did not hesitate, and immediately knelt down. I obey your order. I will give you enough helpers to ensure your safety. Chu Qinghuang raised his voice, Fu Feng, Fu Ying. 2 figures appeared outside the imperial study room like lightning, stepped through the door, and knelt down to receive the order. Your Majesty. You 2 will protect Chu Suan's personal safety. When you arrive in Wuzhu, you will obey Chu Suan's orders and must not make any mistakes. Yes. In addition, Chu Qinghuang frowned, protect the family of Tan Hualang. If the news leaks out, you should take your own safety and the safety of Tan Hualang's family as the most important. You can make long-term plans for other times. The reason she said this was actually very simple. Talents are rare, and only when they are alive can they do more useful things. She does not ask them to show any nobleness of dying for a case. The case must be investigated 1 day earlier or later. If the person dies, everything will be gone. However, the top 3 students in the first class were instantly impressed, especially Yun Heng, who believed more and more that the saying "don't trust all rumors" made sense. The empress in front of him was clearly a wise emperor. She was born as a woman, but she had more admirable courage than men, and a broad mind that embraced the world and tolerated everything. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 388. In fact, from the surface, many things Chu Qinghuang did were really incredible. For example, even if the top 3 students were outstanding in knowledge, they didn't know much after all. It was too hasty to appoint them as the imperial study room counselors. Another example is Zhou Xiao, the 6th master of the Zhou family, who obviously had an inseparable relationship with Qin Kuaju, but the empress, who always acted coldly, let him go. Not only that, but she also entrusted him with an important task. Isn't she worried about endless troubles? It is said that there is no business without fraud. Why can a person like Zhou Xiao get her trust? The sky is high and the emperor is far away. There are many tricks and twists in the business world. Who can guarantee that he will abide by the law and be loyal to the emperor and the country in the future? Another example is Yun Heng. Yun Heng originally thought that he would be punished. He had considered the decision of writing an article to complain to the emperor in the palace examination many times, and thought about it countless times. Even if he did not regret it, he had thought about the consequences countless times. This is a move that challenges the majesty of the emperor. It is a decision that is opportunistic and plays tricks in front of the king. It is extremely risky. It can be said that life and death are unpredictable. Even if there are difficulties, it is absolutely not in accordance with the rules to file a complaint in the palace examination. But the queen just lightly exposed it, without even a word of accountability, making him feel like he was dreaming. Only Chu Qinghuang herself knows the truth. She is not a fiery eye that can distinguish loyalty and treachery at a glance, nor is she a sharp eye that can tell whether a person is reliable after meeting him once. She just has one more ability than others. People can lie with their mouths, but their hearts cannot. So she knows the loyalty of Prince Rong's family, knows that Wen Zhan can be used, and knows that Zhou Xiao is truly surrendering, not just perfunctory for self-protection. Of course, she also knows Yun Heng's sincere heart that is not afraid of taking risks for the sake of tea farmers. She is a narrow-minded woman who is vindictive, but to be a tolerant queen, she has her own scale to measure right and wrong. The superficial rules can only restrict people's behavior, but they cannot influence their thoughts. She will judge whether it is right or wrong, and she doesn't need to care about other people's evaluation. Of course, only she knows these. When Zhou Xiao asked for an audience, Wen Zhan and Yun Heng had already left, but Chu Suans was still there. "I pay my respects to Her Majesty." Chu Qinghuang said, "No need to be polite." Zhou Xiao was slightly stunned and almost thought he had heard wrongly. The last time he met the emperor, he knelt for half an hour. It should be said that he knelt during the whole process of talking to Chu Qinghuang, and he couldn't even raise his head. Why is his attitude so good this time? Zhou Xiao figured it out after a little thought. He had been rude to her before, so it was normal for her to punish him. After all, the majesty of the queen should not be offended, and he had murderous intentions towards her. She didn't wipe out all 9 clans of the Zhou family, which was already very kind. What's the big deal about kneeling for a while? Today, His Majesty is in a good mood and has no interest in making things difficult for him, but it can also be seen from this that Her Majesty is not a person who likes to bear grudges. As she said before, revenge should be taken on the spot. Holding a grudge against someone is too tiring and a waste of time. Zhou Xiao thought about it and felt relieved. He thanked her respectfully, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Chu Qinghuang glanced at him. She only said 2 words. He could imagine so much. It seems that it would be more appropriate to let him kneel down to talk next time. Let's get back to the topic. Wuzhou Julian Town is the largest tea town in Ziki. All kinds of famous teas come from Wuzhou. Chu Qinghuang said in a light tone, "How much do you know about Wuzhou?" Wuzhou. Zhou Xiao frowned slightly. "I have a cousin who is a tea merchant in Wuzhou." Chu Qinghuang frowned and looked up at him. "Cousin? My uncle's cousin, my mother's nephew." Zhou Xiao nodded. The Zhou family also has tea houses in various places in Ziki. More than half of the tea is purchased by my cousin, and then resold to the tea house, making a profit in the middle. The water should not fall into the fields of outsiders. The closest relationship in the community of interests is the family, whether in the officialdom or in the business world. Chu Qinghuang was silent for a long time, and his tone was obviously a little colder. So, Wuzhou tea merchants monopolized the tea industry and joined forces with the government to lower the price, causing tea farmers to have to sell good tea at a low price. A year of hard work has gone down the drain, and even food and clothing have become a problem. You know these things very well. Yes. Zhou Xiao knelt down again. "I know my crime." "Don't say you don't know about the collusion between officials and businessmen in Wuzhou." Zhou Xiao smiled bitterly. "What is this? Is it your own fault, or is it your own fault?" If he could have foreseen this, he would have definitely abided by the law and fulfilled his duties while developing his own business. He would rather earn less, at least he could face it calmly, instead of being questioned like this and being speechless. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 389. Chu Qinghuang said calmly, "It seems that you know." Zhou Xiao lowered his head and remained silent, unable to deny. As a merchant family with industries all over the country, intelligence on the market must be mastered, including the places where the family's influence extends, the government's style of doing things, the style of other local merchants, the depth of the relationship between the government and the major families, and who is the backer behind each family. All of these must be understood clearly. So if he said he didn't know, it would be obviously deceiving himself. It's just that he never took these things seriously before. What does the suffering have to do with him? What does it have to do with the tea farmers who work hard for a year and can't make ends meet? Businessmen value interests. He is not a bodhisattva who saves the suffering, so how can he care so much? Officials themselves break the law, so how can he, a businessman, be a good person who helps the world? However, at this time, he was questioned by this woman one sentence at a time, or rather, it was not questioning, but just routine questions. He suddenly felt a little embarrassed and ashamed. Things that he used to take for granted now seemed less confident. "I do know," Zhou Xiao said, his face flushed. "I feel ashamed." Chu Qinghuang said calmly, "Did the Zhou family participate?" "No," Zhou Xiao said, "I know the inside story, but I have always turned a blind eye to it. I have given the task of investigating the Wuzhu case to Chu Suans, and you are responsible for assisting him." Chu Qinghuang ordered, "I will give you 2 months, and this case must be completed. All those involved must not be let go." "I obey your order." Zhou Xiao accepted the order. "I obey your order." Chu Qinghuang stared at him for a moment, and said indifferently, "Don't you need to consider it?" "Your Majesty, I don't need to consider it," Zhou Xiao replied respectfully. "Taking this task means that you will offend your uncle and mother, put your cousin to death with your own hands, and even cause dissatisfaction among the Zhou family clan. Not only that, perhaps even some of the Zhou family's business partners will be full of opinions about him." "I know," Zhou Xiao said, "but there is nothing to worry about. I will obey your Majesty's order. In this case, I don't want anything uncontrollable to happen." Chu Qinghuang looked at him coldly. "If the news is leaked in advance because of you, the evidence is destroyed, or my imperial envoy is harmed, Zhou Xiao, I will never forgive you." Zhou Xiao sighed silently and accepted the order respectfully. "I dare not." He will not betray her, not this time, and not in the future. Whether it is for himself, for the family, or just for the heart that was accidentally discarded. In the future, he will definitely turn over a new leaf and become a new person. Zhou Xiao laughed at himself. He was really a hunter pecked by an eagle. Oh, it should be a phoenix. Forget it, no matter how smart the hunter is, he is not the opponent of the phoenix, and this phoenix is the true son of heaven. Even if defeated, it is still glorious. The Wuzhu case was temporarily settled. Chu Suans and Zhou Xiao took their leave after receiving the order and went down to make preparations. Before going to Wuzhu, Chu Suans needed to have a comprehensive understanding of Wuzhu officials and the major merchants who were in a group. Chu Qinghuang, who was still in the imperial study, held a teacup in his hand and stared at Yunhan's paper thoughtfully. The whole country of Ziki had been plagued by corruption for a long time, from the royal family and official families to local officials and merchant families in various states. They took bribes and used their power to enrich themselves. Officials and businessmen colluded to exploit the people. The powerful families monopolized one side. The Wuzhu case showed only the tip of the iceberg. Now that Yunhan had petitioned the emperor for his hometown, the situation of tea farmers could be improved in the future, but what about other places that have not been exposed? How is the annual harvest of ordinary people on farmland? Are grain prices in various places also monopolized? Are there any farmers being oppressed and grain merchants making huge profits from it? Obviously there are. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 390. 3 days later, Chu Suans received the secret order, took Fufeng and Fuying and left the imperial city, secretly heading to Wuzhu. In the next few days, Chu Qinghuang convened officials from the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of War to discuss matters, and Chu Tianling was among them. The main content of the discussions was to raise soldiers, help farmers, and pay taxes. Strong soldiers and horses are the most important thing at present. A strong army represents the strength of the country and the king. Only when the country and the king are strong can orders and prohibitions be enforced and government orders can be carried out smoothly. Only when the king's decree goes out of the forbidden gates and officials strictly abide by it at all levels, with awe and uneasiness, can they carry out the decree to the maximum extent, instead of being obedient and secretly holding back. Both agriculture and commerce must be taken seriously, and people's livelihood cannot be ignored. All aspects were carried out in an orderly manner, and the decrees were promulgated one after another. Taking advantage of the fact that the officials were very jealous of her and did not dare to play tricks at the moment, it was a good time to make drastic changes in political achievements. June 16 ushered in the hottest summer weather of the year. The Ministry of Punishment and Dali Temple jointly investigated the case of King Xian, and many officials were involved. Among them, apart from Qin Kuaju's family, the Zhou family was the most conspicuous. The evidence of King Xian's crime is conclusive and cannot be denied. What awaits him is either death or a lifetime of imprisonment. The Queen Mother could not sit still and arrived at the imperial study in person. "Your Majesty, please stay." Chu Xuanyi looked at the Queen Mother who was coming in the phoenix chariot and stopped him firmly. "The royal study is an important place. No one is allowed to enter unless summoned by your Majesty." The Queen Mother looked at him coldly. "Go and inform her. I have something important to tell her." Chu Xuanyi was silent for a moment, gave orders to the people around him, and then turned around and entered the imperial study. In addition to the dragon case in the imperial study, there are two desks placed side by side against the wall on the left. At this time, Wen Zhan and Yun Heng, two new members of the Imperial Study Office, were sitting in front of the desks, sifting through memorials and looking through files for Her Majesty the Queen. "Your Majesty." Chu Xuanyi bowed and saluted. "The Queen Mother wishes to see you." Chu Qinghuang raised his eyes slightly. "Let her come in." "Yes." When Chu Xuanyi turned around and walked out, Wen Zhan and Yun Heng had already stood up. When the Queen Mother entered the door, they saluted respectfully and said hello. The Queen Mother's gaze passed over the two people's faces indifferently, then turned to look at Chu Qinghuang. "Your Majesty. Is there something wrong, Queen Mother?" "I'm here to ask what your Majesty plans to do with Tianqiu," the Queen Mother said as sinkingly as water. "I have never felt sorry for you since your Majesty was the eldest princess. When your Majesty ascended the throne as emperor, I did not summon the ministers to object. From beginning to end, I feel that I have been extremely benevolent to His Majesty. Can your Majesty let Tianqiu go?" "The utmost benevolence and righteousness." Chu Qinghuang thought about this word and said lightly, "The Queen Mother has indeed never felt sorry for me before. Although the Queen Mother knows the reason in her heart, she just wants to compete with the snipe and the clam for the fishermen to profit, but these are not important." Putting down the pen in his hand, Chu Qinghuang took a sip of tea, took a short rest, and continued, "The Queen Mother has never made things difficult for me before, so I have never treated the Queen Mother harshly. Even if you intend to poison my father." "I didn't poison," the Queen Mother was furious, "that was the Emperor's design to frame me." Chu Qinghuang was silent for a moment and raised his eyebrows lightly. "Why did my father want to frame you?" "Isn't it clear to your Majesty why he framed me?" the Queen Mother sneered. "Of course it is to suppress our mother and son, so that we can abdicate the throne naturally and let you inherit the throne." Chu Qinghuang calmly sipped her tea. "Okay, let's just assume she is right. In short, whether you really want to poison you or whether your father framed you, I have not treated you harshly." Chu Qinghuang said calmly. "If King Xian did not do anything wrong, I would not deal with him. But he ordered people to set up an ambush on the road with the intention of assassinating me." At this point, the corners of her lips raised slightly. "The Queen Mother should know what the crime of regicide is, right?" The Queen Mother's heart skipped a beat and she pursed her lips. "As long as you are willing to let him go, I promise that he will stay in peace from now on and never again. There is no second chance," Chu Qinghuang said indifferently. If I can let go of the crime of regicide, how will I govern the country in the future, and how will I convince the people? How will I make all officials feel in awe? The crime of regicide is a crime unforgivable. The Queen Mother's face turned pale, but the person who actually participated in the assassination, Your Majesty, just let him go. Who did the Queen Mother see participating in the assassination? Chu Qing Huang raised an eyebrow. Zhou Xiao. The Queen Mother looked at her coldly. Your Majesty intends to clear his name just because he can give Your Majesty a lot of money? Does this mean that money can make people push around? I'm not sure if money can make people go around, Chu Qing Huang said, but in special times, money can indeed buy your life, but you also need enough money. After a pause, what the national treasury is short of right now is silver. If I want to make 11 qi strong, we cannot do without a steady stream of silver. If Zhou Xiao is willing to give out 5 million taels, he is considered a meritorious person. The merits and demerits are equal to each other. There's no reason to take his life. The Queen Mother said angrily, this is unfair. The Queen Mother needs to make it clear that the person who ordered my assassination was King Xian, and the person who intended to rebel was also King Xian. At best, Zhou Xiao was just an attempted accomplice, Chu Qing Huang said coldly. Besides, I am the emperor. Who do I want to die? Whoever wants to live must die, and whoever wants to live can live. Is it possible that the Queen Mother can still control my decision?